Shalom, everyone. This is the second in a three-part series on the worlds of Tohu and Tikkun and Shvirat Hakeilim. The previous world of Tohu, sometimes translated as chaos, the world of rectification, the world of Tikkun, and the breaking of the vessels. I'll do a quick review. It's always good to review, even if you were here last week, but if you weren't, we started this series by connecting it to the 3-week period that we're in now. That's why we're discussing this, because it begins with Yud Zayin B'Tammuz, where the 2 tablets of the law were broken, the first tablets. That Moshe came down from Mount Sinai and he broke them when he saw the golden calf. And it culminates in Tisha B'Av, which commemorates we'll call it the breaking or the destruction of the 2 temples. So this whole period is about breaking. And that, of course, is connected to what's called Shvirat Hakeilim. We discussed very in short the worlds of Tohu, the worlds of Tikkun, and what the breaking of the vessels were, just very simply that the lights of the previous world of Tohu were incredibly strong, and the initial vessels of creation could not hold them, and they shattered. And that this world is made up of the broken vessels of a previous world. That's why it's called the world of rectification. And that is why the whole concept of Tikkun Olam is so important. Rectifying the world, because we'll call it the name of the game in this world. This is what we're here to do as individuals, as the Jewish people and all of humanity, is to come to a full redemption where the broken vessels of previous worlds, previous incarnations will be rectified. We discussed how these worlds are alluded to in the 1st and 2nd verses of the Torah. Some of that will return perhaps tonight. But the most important thing, we tried to personalize the concept of Tohu and Tikkun, and especially Shvirat Hakeilim. And we looked at our own psychological, emotional, intellectual challenges and the whole phenomenon where sometimes the energy that we're dealing with is too much for us. There's too much energy, not enough inner strength to deal with it. Some of the terms that we threw out were, I can't handle this, I'm freaking out, this is too much for me, I got to get out of here, I need some space. All these kinds of phrases represent Shvirat Hakeilim. So we were trying to show that the breaking of the vessels is not a one-time event that happened in Kabbalistic cosmology. It is an ongoing energy that we're dealing with pretty much 24/7. And then we saw, this is the end of our review, but the very, very important thing that the root word in Hebrew for breaking, for Shvirat Hakeilim, the breaking of the vessels, is shever, shin bet resh. And we saw that paradoxically, it means breaking, destroying, but it also means to provide and to sustain. And that we saw in the life of Yosef. He's called the mashbir, the provider. We saw it when Yaakov sends his sons down to acquire grain. He said, I see shever b'Mitzrayim, I see food, I see sustenance. But prophetically, he was also seeing a breaking that would happen in Egypt. And so we ended the first class with a realization that Shvirat Hakeilim, the breaking of the vessels, was not, as it were, a mistake in creation, but was a part of the process that really every single person goes through when faced with trials and tribulations and obstacles and conflict, that we have the ability to take these sometimes very unwanted adverse conditions in our life and to turn them into something positive. And the two metaphors that we gave, one is an exploding star. The star basically dies. It's a dying star, and it explodes, and it spews its elements all over the universe. And the universe exists because of these breaking of the vessels, especially on Earth. We are here only because of these stars that died in the course of creation. And the other one we used was the tree, where the tree drops its fruit, its leaves, its blossoms, and they become absorbed in the ground, and they become the fertilizer for the next year's growth. So here we took the idea of Shvirat Hakeilim and kind of reframed it in a way that it sustains and it provides for future developments. So that was a review. And last week I said that this week we're going to look a little bit more technically at how Kabbalah treats Shvirat Hakeilim, excuse me, where they see the hints and the allusions to it, the remezim in the Torah, and also obviously how it applies to us. So to do this, I'm going to review again the second verse of the Torah. Ha'aretz hayta tohu v'vohu v'choshech al pnei ha'tahom v'ruach Elokim merachefet al pnei hamayim. The earth was chaotic and void, and darkness upon the deep or the abyss, and the Spirit of God moved across the waters. So we learned, actually this might have been in 70 Faces, that these four descriptions, Tohu, Vavohu, Choshech, and Pnei Tahom, these represent the four exiles that the Jewish people have gone through. And Ruach Elokim is explained in the Midrash to be the Ruach of Mashiach. So here we see all of history in this one verse, all of the four cardinal archetypal exiles that we have gone through, and in fact, all the exiles, and the culmination of history, which will be the coming of Mashiach. But the Arizal revealed when it said that the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. So he took this word mirachefet, which means hovering, and he said the first letter and the last letter is met, died. And the middle letters, chet, resh, pei, equals 288. These are the Arizal takes this symbolic number, 288, and says, these are the 288 broken vessels that shattered in Shvirat Hakeilim. They died. Now we're going to see the incredible connection to why the Arizal said this. He saw it in this one word, the hint, because it says, and the earth was Tohu. It mentions the name of the previous world, the world of Tohu, of chaos. And of course, with the Ruach Elokim hovering over the waters, this is the Spirit of Mashiach, which will be the complete Tikkun of the world. So what we did mention last week is this word, mirachefet, is the 18th word of the Torah. 18, of course, is chai. So here we have this built-in paradox that the 18th word, the chai word of the Torah, the Arizal says is these are the death of the 288 sparks or shards that fell in Shvirat Hakeilim. So you have, again, the idea where shever, breaking, is a death in a sense, but it's also what leads to further life. It's part of the evolutionary cycle. Now, what's interesting is Onkelos, he translates tohu, the word tohu, as tzadi. Now, tzadi is one of the letters of the Torah. And the Ari gives over, we'll call it further support, is if you take the three letters of tzadi, this is the Ari did this all the time. And he added the numerical value of tzadi, and then tzadi daled, and then tzadi daled yud. Notice he spelled out the name one letter at a time. If you add those together, it equals 288. It comes to these broken vessels. Now, if you add a kuf to the end of tzadi, you have tzadik. And in fact, the Arizal called the letter tzadik. He called it tzadik. So here we have the idea of the kuf. The kuf is the only letter of the 22 normative letters, not the final letters, that goes below the line. And so this is symbolic of the tzaddik, the righteous one, going down below to redeem the sparks of light that fell with the breaking of the vessels. And it's given over in Chassidut that is the role of the tzaddik. The tzaddik is searching out hidden sparks everywhere, identifying and redeeming sparks everywhere. So now we're going to go to Parshat Vayishlach in Sefer Bereshit, Genesis. We're going to the the 36th chapter, the 31st verse, 36:31. And this is coming at the end, Parshat Vayishlach. Yaakov had met Esav. Yaakov is back in Israel. And the end of Parshat Vayishlach goes to a long list of the progeny of Esav. And it begins by saying, Esav, hu Edom. Hu Edom. Edom comes from the word red. And he gets this name because Esav came out like his hair was red. He was a gingy. So at the end of this long lineage, it says, these are the kings that ruled in the land of Edom before there was a king among the children of Israel. And then it goes and it lists 8 kings. And each time it gives their name and where they lived. And it says, Vayamat, they died. And then it says, Vayimloch tachtav, and this one ruled in their place. Each one, they died, he died, and this one ruled in his place 7 times. And it gives the name of these people and the place where they lived. And then there's an 8th king. Now the first 7, it does not mention that they had a wife or they were married or there was a queen. It just says these were the ones that ruled, that were kings in the land of Edom. The 8th one, we're going to get into this much deeper. The 8th one is named, and his wife is named, and it does not say that he died. So if someone didn't know any oral Torah, they would read this, and like much of the end of Vayishlach would be like, why do we have to know all of this? Why? What are all these names? What is all this lineage? But here, in this one piece that I just described, the Zohar, and especially the Arizal, said some of the greatest secrets of the Torah can be found in this passage. And what is the great secret here? The secret of the breaking of the vessels. And this is how the Arizal explained it. He explained it that the 7 kings that ruled and died, these are the 7 Shvirot. And when we talk about the breaking of the vessels, so we ask, well, what were the vessels? So according to Kabbalah, the vessels were the Shvirot. But they were what we'll call it, the immature initial way that the Shvirot were operating in the world. And the Arizal says, so why did they break? Each one said, Ana emloch, I will rule, meaning me and no one else. I don't need anyone else. I don't have to participate. I don't have to have a partnership. I can rule the world. Now, this sounds like many dictators alive and in previous generations. In other words, I knit the whole world, like Nebuchadnezzar. Everyone has to bow down to me. So many different kings made themselves into gods. Pharaoh was considered a god, and they're the center of the universe. And so the Ari explains the reason that the Shvirot shattered was because they didn't know how, they didn't have the ability to know how to participate with others, to partner, to have a holistic vision. And so each one, it says, died, and this one ruled after him. And then that one died, and then that one ruled after him. So the Ari explains that this is a metaphor, a symbolic rendering of the breaking of the vessels. Now, in one of Rav Ginsburg's books called Chassidut David HaNemanim, the deeds of loving kindness of David, like the faithful one, it's from a pasuk. So there's, I believe, 5 volumes, a total of 3,000 words, 3,000 pages. On Shvirat Hakeilim, there is 300 or 400 pages on this passage. On just this passage, there's 300 or 400 pages explaining what all the names mean, all the gematrias, all the places where they live, what's their connection to the Shvirot. What is Shvirat Hakeilim? What is the world of Tohu? What is the world of Tikkun? A whole thing. So I'm bringing this because it's important to understand that according to the Kabbalah, the broken vessels were the Shvirat themselves. And we're told there are different versions of what the Shvirat looked like in a previous world, in the world of Tohu, and what they look like in the world of Tikkun. So there's this idea, even though there's different opinions, and I'll explain in a second, I'm just going to show everyone here that this is called Igulim. In other words, the Shvirot do not, this is how they're structured now. And we'll get to this in 3 lines, 3 axes. But in the previous world, they were in circles, like an onion, with each Shvira within each Shvira. The farthest out one was Keter. The most inner one is Malchut. Another version says that all of the Shvira were simply in one line. Keter, Chachma, Bina, Dat. Another version is that they were in 2 lines. And so therefore, the structure of the Shvirot, as we see here, 3 lines. This represents more than anything what's called Olam HaTikkun, the fixing of the world. We're going to get back to that in a few minutes. But just to continue with this passage of the kings that ruled and died. So Rav Ginsburg says something very, very interesting as a way that we can understand in contemporary terms. He said that each Shvira, which said, I will rule, Ana Emloch, he said we can relate to this as different isms. And each ism thinks that they are everything. The whole world has to be like them. Now, it could be a political ism or it could be a religious ism. It could be socialism. It could be communism. It could be capitalism. It could be the woke culture. It could be all kinds of things. But the point is that each one thinks they have the exclusive rights on truth. There are certain religions that if you are not part of their religion, then you are an infidel and you are treated in a certain way, or you're bound for hell, and there is no redemption. There's no redemption. If you're not part of that belief system, then everyone else is like out of the game. So that's how Rav Ginsburg explained it, so we could understand, what does it mean, I will rule? So when each of these isms thinks like they have an exclusive right on the truth, and everyone has to be like them. I'd say, I mean, very much what's happening in Western culture in America right now, there's a lot of this going on, put it that way. That people really don't know how to talk to each other anymore, because if you express a certain opinion, you're really deserving of cancellation. You're canceled. You don't you have no place in the world because you don't prescribe to the politically correct, and it's not politically, culturally correct views of the day, or at least what some people think are the views of the day. So that's just a very interesting way of looking at what does it mean? Each one ruled and died. ruled and died. And we see throughout history, one religion after another, one ism after another, one cultural set of so-called truths are put forward. And that's kind of like how history has unfolded. So now let's just look at the last of the kings. And this also will have a tremendous teaching about what's happening in the world. As we said, the first 7, it just mentions the king and no mention of a wife or a queen, except the last one. And his name is Hadar. And the name of his wife is mentioned, Mehetavel. Mehetavel. And it says that they come. First, it says that Hadar ruled after the 7th king. The name of his city is Pa'u, and the name of his wife is Mehetavel, and she is the daughter of Matred, the daughter of Mezahav. Mezahav is like golden waters. So there's many, many, many secrets here. So first of all, Rav Ginsburg says that it's tremendously significant that it doesn't say that he died, and it mentions his wife. And because this is part of the tikkun for the final redemption. The final redemption is the unity of masculine and feminine. For those who are part of our series on the soul, we talked about this extensively, that this is indicative of the kind of tikkun that is needed to bring a final redemption. But it's not just masculine and feminine as we think of male and female. As we mentioned many times in the Zohar, masculine and feminine is talking about energies. And we spoke much about this idea of l'shem yichud kudsha brichu v'shchinte. For the sake of unifying the Holy One, blessed be He, with the Shekhinah. So this idea of Hadar and Mehetavel is really hinting at this important final tikkun that needs to be made. Now, we have talked before about the tikkun called Tikkun Chava, the fixing of Chava. Because after eating from the Eitz Hadat Tov Ra, well, Chava ate first, and then she gave it to Adam. And it's explained in Kabbalah, but we see it throughout history, that the status of women fell. There was a tremendous fall of women's stature and status in the world until, we'll just say, maybe the last 100 years. And we see it everywhere in every society, every culture, that the status of women is rising everywhere. It's rising everywhere. And this is part of a very, very important rectification that has to happen, that is hinted to right here with Hadar and Mehetavel. The gematria of Hadar and Mehetavel equals Isha, 306. Mehetavel is 97. Hadar is 209. And together it equals Isha. So what about the place that they live? Pa'u. What does this mean? So Pa'u is Gematria 156 equals Sion. Sion. So as we're saying, Hadar represents, in a sense, Mashiach, the rectification of the breaking of the vessels. Hadar and Mehei Tavel represent a big part of the type of rectification that has to occur. And of course, coming Mashiach is focused on Sion, the return to Sion. And the Arizal did an amazing thing of reframing all of Jewish history, where he explains that it's true that the temples were destroyed and we went into exile, we'll say for our sins, for our lackings, for our blemishes, for not doing what we should have done in the land, as far as treating each other and our relationship with God. And so therefore the temples were destroyed and we were exiled. So on the surface, and there's certainly part of which is true, that it was a punishment. The punishment could also be reframed as the results of our own actions. Because all the prophets came over and over again and said, if you'll change your ways, everything will be fine. If you don't change your ways, the temples will be destroyed and you'll be sent into exile, and it's going to be a bad scene. It's going to be a long and terrible exile. The people did not listen, and the result was the destruction of the temples and exile. But the Arizal took Jewish history, and in a sense, he reframed it, and he said, in a sense, it was needed for the Jewish people to be spread out all over the world, to Arpa Kanfot Ha'aretz, to the four corners of the world, in order to bring the light of Torah to mankind and to gather, identify. David, I'm sorry, I couldn't see your chat. We'll deal with it right after class. I'm sorry. So in other words, just being in exile as a punishment, the Ari says, no, it's much deeper than that. That we were in exile because we had to go out and gather up. We had to do two things. We had to spread the light and knowledge and wisdom of the Torah. And you could see its influence in every culture, every society throughout history. And at the same time, to gather up the sparks and to bring them back to Israel, to Pa'u, to Tzion. And from there, when all the lights are brought together and condensed, that will bring the energy that will bring Mashiach. Now, Rav Kook, in his own brilliant, poetic way, talked about this all the time. All the time, the idea of Jews coming from the four corners of the earth back to Israel. He had such a prophetic vision of what was happening. This is back in the 20s and 30s. But he saw the ingathering of the exiles, but he saw it in a messianic context. And he saw Jews bringing back these sparks of light from all over the world. And that when they would be brought together in Israel, in Sion, in Pa'u, then the Mashiach would be able to come. two more things. One is that Hadar, the name of this last king, it actually means to return. It means to beautify, and it means to return. So this is the idea that the most important ingredient in the redemptive process that we're in now is doing tshuva. As individuals and as all of Am Yisrael is to do tshuva, to return. Hadar is to return. One last thing is, it says Mahetavel is the daughter of Matred, the daughter of Mei Zahav. So Mei Zahav equals 64, equals Adam Chava. Adam Chava. And actually last week already, when we talked about different episodes in the Torah that are considered the like breaking of the vessels. So we talked about breaking the luchot, and we said that really the first one was when Adam and Chava didn't have the vessels to deal with utopia. They were living in we'll call it a utopian environment, and they didn't have vessels for it. It was too much. And it's the same thing with Am Yisrael. Everyone asks, how could it be 40 days after the greatest revelation of God to the world ever, 40 days later, they're making a golden calf? It's like, how do we understand this? So we can understand it is they didn't have the vessels to receive this incredible light that was coming down. They could, if you remember, after the first two of the 10 commandments, the people came to Moshe and said, we can't deal with this. It's too much for us. You talk to God and you tell us what he says. And of course, the Midrash says that every word that God spoke, their souls left their bodies. In other words, the combination of soul and body, neshama and guf, couldn't handle this kind of awesome revelation of godliness. So these are examples of breaking the vessel. So here, the first one was Adam and Eve. And it's hinted here in this name, Mei Zahav, equals Adam, Eve, Adam, Chava. Another amazing thing that Rav Ginsburg says is after these 8 kings, it continues and it gives the names of 11 generals coming from Esav. And so Rav Ginsburg said that 8 and 11 equals 19, equals Chava. Again, hinting that what we call Tikkun Chava, the fixing of the feminine energy. And this includes in men also. It's not just women, but we all have feminine energy and all women have masculine energy. And the whole universe, we spent a lot of time on this in the series about the soul. The whole universe is pervaded with these two energies that we call masculine and feminine, which is giving and receiving. It's like everywhere is these energies. So now I want to take it just one more step. And as I mentioned before, the importance of the structure of the Shvirat being in 3 lines, like we see in the picture behind me. By the way, that's for my daughter. Devaria did that. So we would actually need quite a bit of time, but I'm going to try to do this somewhat quickly, because if we're trying to understand the world of Tohu and the world of Tikkun, so it's explained that the way that the Shvirat transform themselves either from circles or one line or even two lines to three lines is symbolic of the types of tikkunim that are needed. And so these three lines represent just what's called in a triangle, it's called thesis, antithesis, and what's the word here? Synthesis. In other words, the idea of the triangle is very, very symbolic of Olam HaTikkun. So we have, again, thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. And that is the shape of the Shvirat, where we have thesis, antithesis, synthesis. And if you look carefully, it's made up of many different triangles. All the Shvirot are made up of triangles. They're all connected in triangles. So triangles obviously are connected to the number 3, as we show, like that's why I put these pictures specifically, is the Magen David. So the Magen David, in a way, if you only have 2 lines, you have duality. If you have 1 line, you have no holism, no integration. If you have 2 lines, then you have duality and all that implies. So here in the Magen David, in a sense, you have 1 triangle going up and 1 triangle going down. But the important thing is that they interlock and they create a middle space. That's the middle space of the Magen David. And so in the Torah, a couple of times we're called Am Segula, a special, precious people. And Am Segula, this is it's very close to the idea of the chosen people. That's usually Am HaNivchar, the chosen people. But Am Segula is a very similar, a very special people. So here you'll see these 3 dots form the vowel called the segol. The segol is a triangle, and this is the root of segula. Why is segula means precious, special. So what's its connection with a triangle? Because a triangle is the secret of holism, of integration. And so one of the ways we can think of being an Am Segula is the people that know the secret of 3, the secret of the triangle, the secret of the segol, because this has to do with integration. So in one of the deepest parts of the Zohar, called the Idra Rabbah, the great gathering, where Rabbi Shimon gathers all of his top Talmidim, and he says, "Oi, if I reveal, oi, if I don't reveal." He was in a quandary. He had such secrets to reveal, but he knew that revealing secrets in the world is not a simple thing. But in a different book, Sefer Tzniuta, in English, it's translated the Book of Modesty. Sefer Tzniuta, he begins by saying, how long are we going to stand on one foot? And it's interpreted to mean, how long are we going to continue to dwell in the world of Tohu and not make the real transition to the world of Tikkun? And what he was saying is standing on one foot, so you can't make any Tikkun. Now, even if you look at the human body is like the Shvirat. We have right and left and a middle column. This is not stam. A right, left, and a middle column. So here we're told that the secret of three, the secret of being an Am Segula, is the secret of what's called Olam Ha-Tikkun. So with the few minutes left, I just want to mention that Sefer Yetzirah is considered the oldest of Kabbalistic texts. Well, the whole book is based on threes: Olam, Shana, and Nefesh. And we've talked about this many times. Worlds, souls, Olam is world, Shana, I said it wrong. Olam, Shana, and Nefesh. Worlds meaning space, time, and soul. Later, when the Baal Shem Tov had an Aliyat Neshama on Rosh Hashanah, and he was in the presence of the soul of Mashiach, and he asked him, when are you coming? And the Mashiach said, when the well springs of your Torah spread to the farthest reaches. And then he revealed to the Baal Shem Tov, great secret, that in every letter there are worlds, souls, and divinity. Olamot, Neshamot, and Elokut. Again, threes. And then the Baal Shem Tov, he taught over this idea of Olamot, Neshamot, and Elokut, of worlds, souls, and divinity, because the whole world is made up of letters. And so in every circumstance, every point of space and moment of time, you have worlds, souls, and divinity. The Baal Shem also taught that all process goes through three stages: Hachna'ah, Havdalah, and Hamtekah. These are ideas that we've mentioned many times. Hachna'ah means submission. Havdalah means separation. Hamtekah means sweetening. In other words, every process, first a person has to submit themselves to a task at hand. We could sit on our couch and think of a million things to do. But until we actually decide, I'm really going to do this, and I know that it means doing A, B, C, D, and E, until we submit ourselves to doing something, nothing happens. So the first part of a process is called Hachna'ah, submitting to a task at hand. Then comes separation, Havdalah. in order to fulfill this task, I have to make sometimes minute by minute appraisals of what is going to bring me closer to finishing this task and what is going to prevent me. Now, this task can take 10 minutes to do, or it could take 10 years. Someone decides they want to be a doctor, and they submit to the reality that they're going to have to go through school and internship for 10 years. That's their submission. And their Havdalah is a daily decision. Is this helping me fulfill my goal? Or am I wasting my time on things that are going to take me away from my goal? And then the final stage is Hamtaka, is sweetening. Is that when we actually get to where we wanted to go, it's actually what we really wanted to do. How many times do we do things? Again, 10 minutes, 10 days, 10 months, 10 years. And then when we get there, it's like, this is not what I thought. I just did all of this. Oh my gosh, it's not what I thought it would be. And of course, frustration and disappointment can enter in there. But what happens if you get to your goal and it's like, yep, this is what I wanted. This is what I worked for. Thank you, Hashem, for giving me the strength. That's sweetening. My whole point here is all these concepts in threes. Now I'm going to read for you very, very quickly. If I didn't lose my place. Give me 1 second. No. Listen to this from Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot is not a mystical text. It's the basic morals and ethics of the Jewish people. But, and I did not pick all of them. They give over ideas over and over and over again in sets of 3. I'm just going to read it quickly. They, meaning the men of the great assembly, said 3 things: be deliberate in judgment, develop many disciples, and make a fence for the Torah. The world stands on 3 things: on Torah, on the service of God, and on doing good deeds. Now here, they don't mention 3 things, but they list 3 things. Let your house be a meeting place for sages, sit in the dust of their feet, and drink in their words thirstily. Here's a famous one from Hillel HaZaken. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? And if I'm only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? And I have here another 5 or 6 mention, and this is from the first chapter of Pirkei Avot. I have like almost 10 right in the first chapter, because they understood that 3 is balance. 3 is integration. 3 is a holistic way to see the world and relate to the world. So this is a little bit about Olam Tikkun in relationship to Olam Tohu. Olam Tohu did not have this balance. That's why each one of the Shvirat said, I can do it alone, I don't need you. My way is the only way. There's no balance there. There's no integration. No one's listening to each other. I'll end with one last beautiful thing, is in the prophet Isaiah. He says, it's talking about Mashiach. he taught many different prophecies about Mashiach. And so one of them says, Ki mirachamam yinhagem. The one who has compassion on others, he will lead. Now we're told many, many times about Moshe Rabbeinu, Hu HaGoel Rishon, Hu HaGoel Acharon. He is the first Redeemer, he is the last Redeemer. Meaning that the soul of Mashiach, part of the soul of Mashiach, along with David HaMelech, will be Moshe. Moshe is the first Redeemer, he's the last Redeemer. Look at the first two letters of Moshe and the first two letters of Mashiach. That's a hint. And the last, Mashiach, is Mem Shin Chai. Moshe is alive in Mashiach. So about Moshe, we say that he had two cardinal traits. One, the Torah attests to itself by saying he was the most humble person on the face of the earth. But what it doesn't mention, but should be very, very obvious, is Moshe's compassion. He had compassion when the Egyptian was beating the Jew, and he lost his whole prince of Egypt because of that. When he goes to the well and he sees the shepherds were harassing the daughters of Yitro, he has Rachmanis, has compassion, and he saves them. And he saves the Jewish people over and over and over. The same Jewish people that wanted to stone him, to replace him, he's constantly praying to God to have compassion on his people. So when it says, Ki mirachamam yinhagem, the one who has compassion, he will lead. It's hinting to Moshe, and the primary trait of the Mashiach is this tremendous rachamim. So why am I mentioning this? Because the word mirachamam equals 288. I learned this from Rav Ginsburg. And remember, 288 is the fallen sparks. And we're told that that's what Mashiach is going to do. Mashiach is the one who gathers up all of the fallen sparks, all of the broken vessels, and will be able to lead the world to redemption. May we live to see it. No, see, I didn't.